welcome to episode 5 in our countdown through the top 10 movies of the decade. This episode, it's 10 movies from 2014 as chosen by myself and Josh, based on how much we enjoyed them, and obviously there will be contentions from yourselves thinking, why is this in the list? Why is this not in the list? And from those in the list, why is this higher or lower than something else? That is what lists are all about. That's what we hope the comments down below are all about. But enough yapping, let's get cracking with the countdown and see who's going to kick us off at number 10. And taking the opening position in our countdown today is a sequel to a movie that featured in an earlier episode. It's the return of those bumbling university undercover cops. It's 22 Jump Street, starring Jonah Hill and Channing Tatum back once again. Peter Stormare's back, Ice Cube is here, Julian Bell joins the cast, as does Amber Stevens and Nick Offerman. And you heard us in the previous episode where they featured, when we talked about 21 Jump Street, about why we thought that was such a fantastic film. Everything about the first film that was so good is put into the second film. They play fast and loose with the trope of teens being cast with much older actors, passing as teenagers, and the first movie was such an unexpected hit. Again, based on a reboot of a TV show, technically a sequel, because Johnny Depp's character from the first Jump Street is in this movie as an adult cop at this point. But it was such an unexpected hit. To try and catch that lightning in a bottle a second time was a very tall order, but they managed to pull it off ridiculously well. Channing Tatum and Jonah Hill are just fantastic again in the roles that they have, and it's interesting in the sense of how they just play off each other. The humour's fantastic, the action is great. Why it's 22 Jump Street is just a fantastic subtle joke just thrown in and then moved on from. The scene where the captain finds out that one of his subordinates is dating his daughter is hilarious. When Channing Tatum's character puts two and two together and finds out, it's hilarious as well. Everything about it just adds to the first movie, and it's phenomenal fun. It plays to its strengths all through the film, never more so when it plays on the trope of stupid and more extended sequels, by going through 23 Jump Street, 24 Jump Street, 25 Jump Street, and on and on and on and on and on in the credit sequence. It's fantastic what they do. Even a little cameo from Seth Rogen in there as well. And 22 Jump Street is a fully deserved kick-off for 2014 in at number 10. Following that, at number 9, is a movie that did divide opinion, and it definitely seems to be one of those Marmites. You either love it or you hate it. There's very little middle ground I've seen from online reviews and comments and reactions. And it's from Seth MacFarlane, most famously known for Family Guy. Does a lot of the voices in Family Guy as well. He's hilarious in general. And this movie was directed and stars him in the lead role. It's the absolutely fantastic, utterly hilarious A Million Ways to Die in the West. It has an astoundingly good cast. It has Seth MacFarlane, as I said, in the lead role, Charlize Theron in the lead female role, Liam Neeson's in here, Amanda Seyfried, Neil Patrick Harris, Giovanni Ribisi, and Sarah Silverman round out the main cast in the movie. There's a fantastic cameo by Christopher Lloyd as Doc Brown, which doesn't overstay its welcome in any fashion. It's just a lovely little knowing sight gag that is just there and gone. They don't stretch it until it stops being funny anymore, and that is the secret to a good comedy, is why things like Airplane and such like work. Not every gag will hit the mark, but they're so rapid fire you get a good one pretty much straight away. Nothing is stretched out to the point that it stops being funny and starts being annoying. There's a lot of crass humour in this, and Crass humour in movies is kind of fallen by the wayside as it relates to like mainstream. You still get crass humour, but generally they're consigned to the bargain bins and looked down upon. This was a breath of fresh air because there was a lot of crass humour in this, and what works so well with it is the characters that need to play it straight in this film play it straight, while the comic relief characters do their job, and the contrast just works so wonderfully. Um, Seth MacFarlane is actually really sweet in the lead role. He's a really amiable guy in the lead role. He's easy to get behind. Charlize Theron continues her ways of playing kick-ass women who take no shit from anybody. She is wonderful as counterfoil to Seth MacFarlane. Liam Neeson plays a fantastically evil bad guy who claims to have a moral code but really doesn't have a moral code. And Neil Patrick Harris is just amazingly slimy and kind of creepy, gives you heebie-jeebies. Is a character called Foy with mustache. If you've seen the movie, you know why mustache is important. And the rest of the supporting cast round out a great bunch of characters. Sarah Silverman and Giovanna Ribisi had a nice little double act in the film as well. The deaths, because it's called A Million Ways to Die in the West, and there's a lot of death in it. And the reason it's called A Million Ways to Die in the West is there's obviously the most obvious ones of being shot and things like that. But there are some, because it's such a developing time in the Wild West, set in the cowboy era, then there are so many new innovations and things that we don't understand. So there is a million ways to die in the West. And the title and the line and so many little things in the film are built upon and then paid off later without even really being heavy-handedly signalled for the most part. It just works brilliantly well, and it's a movie I wish more people would see. It's a movie I wish more people would enjoy. And for me, because Josh hasn't seen it, it's in at number 9. Coming with us, Dead or Alive, into number 8 is the 2014 version of RoboCop. And as we touched on 2013's video and the previous videos, remakes and reboots get a bad rap. There's too much knee-jerk reaction of people going, it's a remake, it's crap. And that's it. And they say there's no originality in Hollywood. And I did an article a long time, about 5 years ago, maybe longer actually, 10 years ago. And I revamped it a couple of times since then, where the knee-jerk reaction of reboots and there's no originality in Hollywood is horseshit. Because there is a lot of originality in Hollywood. If you look at all of the movies that are released, there are more original movies than there are remakes, reboots, sequels, or franchise entries. The reason that the sequels, reboots, and franchise entries and things like that get more attention is because they already have an inbuilt audience. So the news outlets and everything else know that by featuring them, they'll get their clicks, their hits, they'll sell their newspapers, they'll sell their magazines, they'll get views on their videos, that kind of thing, because it has an inbuilt audience. But even now, there are original movies coming out. Christopher Nolan's about to release Tenet, which we're really, really excited about. But even this year, obviously they're not going to feature because this is the new decade, but even this year, The Invisible Man was, I think it's my favourite movie that I've seen in the cinema this year. I've only seen 4 movies in the cinema this year. That would be Sonic, Birds of Prey, Bad Boys for Life, and The Invisible Man. Of those, The Invisible Man is a reboot. Bad Boys for Life is a sequel and a franchise. The Sonic the Hedgehog movie is an adaptation of a video game character. And Birds of Prey is a semi-sequel to Suicide Squad and part of the DCEU. So none of them are original titles. All of them are great in their various ways. And Invisible Man is a reboot of a story that's been told many, many times, and it was fantastic. So reboots are not bad. This was always going to have an uphill struggle because of this guy, of how revered the original RoboCop movies are. A lot of that is to do with nostalgia, but the movies are fantastic. I rewatched them, and Josh watched RoboCop 1 and 2 for the first time quite recently. He had watched this version, the 2014 version, first, and he enjoyed them all. I enjoyed them all. Nostalgia is dangerous because we tend to put things on a pedestal. With this one, Jose Padilla was on a hiding to nothing. If he made a fantastic movie, people would still say the original was better. If he made a terrible movie, they would say he shouldn't have made it at all. This is a good movie. Joel Kinnaman is great in the title role. Gary Oldman is fantastic as the scientist who saves Murphy's life and turns him into RoboCop. Michael Keaton is great as a corporate villain. Abby Cornish is in the movie as Alex Murphy's wife. Jackie Earle Haley plays a fantastic trainer who doesn't want RoboCop to succeed, but he's designed to train droids to do the actions that cops should do to help save lives, in theory. Michael K. Williams is in it, Jennifer L. Jay Baruchel, who's making another appearance in the list, and Samuel L. Jackson, who has also appeared in the list as well. They're all in it. Samuel L. Jackson takes over the satirical news broadcast type things, and he plays a kind of Alex Jones character, and he does it really, really well. Now, in this film, one of the struggles was in the 80s when the movie was made by Paul Verhoeven. One of the things that made it stand out, because it was set in the then future, one of the things that made it stand out was the satirical news. How things that were super violent or aggressive were treated as mundane news articles. Rolling 24-hour news and the satire and everything else, it has more or less become the reality of today. And because of that, you can't satire something that has now become the satire. So they had to find a way around that, and they did it really, really well, with the burden of taking the satire element in the remake, the reboot, falling on the shoulders of Samuel L. Jackson's character, Pat Novak. As mentioned, he's kind of like an Alex Jones figure. So his news stories are biased. They're opinion pieces, and they're obviously put across as opinion pieces, but they're delivered as if he's stating facts. And a lot of the satire from the original movie is filtered through his character's mouth. Michael Keaton is great value. As I said, he's always a fantastic actor in the movies that he either leads or has supporting roles in. This is more of a background character, but he does really well with it. Gary Oldman as the lead scientist involved in the RoboCop program. Also, Gary Oldman is cinema win say he's always a win. Jackie L. Haley is an actor who I love. I loved him as Rorschach in Watchmen. I loved him in A Nightmare on Elm Street, as we mentioned in the very first episode of this series. I love him in this. He can play sympathetic, but he can play nasty, mean person really well. And in this, as I say, he's kind of like the trainer for the police, how they do operations and tactics and everything else. And in this movie, he's the antagonist because he is to put RoboCop through his paces, and it's to check whether RoboCop is worthy of being in the field, and he doesn't want him in the field. Joel Kinnaman in the lead role had possibly the biggest uphill struggle because he had to replace the great Peter Weller. Now, in RoboCop 3 onwards, it wasn't Peter Weller, so there's been more non-Peter Weller RoboCop than there has been Peter Weller RoboCop. But for my generation and the people who grew up with this movie, Peter Weller, the mannerisms, the look, the voice, is RoboCop. So he had to step into these shoes and make it his own. And to try and get us to move past Peter Weller, which is still my favourite version of the character. He did a great job of it. And the 2014 version expands on Alex Murphy's home life, his wife, kid, and everything else. We get to see a lot more of that. And one of the big twists, or the big changes from the original movie, is that after he is rebuilt as Robocop, his wife is made aware straight away, and they still kind of have a relationship. That was a big departure. His kid is aware of it as well. Another thing that they did really, really well in this movie is updating the robotics. Because what was futuristic in 1984 isn't necessarily going to be cutting edge in 2014 when the film came out, and in the near future again when the film was set. So they updated the suit amazingly well. There's a nice homage to the original suit in it to obviously show that it was considered, but they went with a much sleeker design. They also went with a much sleeker design on the Ed 209, who are featured in the movie as well. An interesting aspect of the script is free will. In the original Robocop and in this one, he's always told he's a machine, he's product. The scene where Murphy he realizes what he is now, and he wants to see what's left of him. So the suit is taken away, and all he is his right hand, some internal organs up through, and his head. That's all he is. That is a very frightening scene. To see that, to wonder, to see that, to wonder what it would be like, to realise that that's all you are, because there's a pervading scientific theory that I believe that you are only your brain. That's all you are. The rest of your body, your eyes is for your brain to see, and everything else, your hands and everything, your body is just to move your brain around. You're just your brain. Which is why, when Murphy is in the suit, he doesn't realise he doesn't have all his parts. Because he's just his brain, and his brain's wired to this suit that does have all the parts. So that's a very powerful scene. There's also one of the first demonstrations of what Robocop can do. It's a warehouse full of droids, and it's to simulate like an attack on a warehouse, like in the first movie when they attacked Sal's warehouse, the drug factory. And Murphy is hesitating a little bit. That's his human instinct. So they turn that off and turn the machine into the overriding power behind Robocop, while still letting Murphy believe he's in control. It's actually quite deep for an action movie, and people forget as well that a lot of time with Paul Verhoeven's movies, there's a lot of depth in the thought. Robocop, Starship Troopers is another one, and this one has it as well. And the end of the movie, I'm gutted we never got a follow-up to this, because I would have loved to see it. They are making another Robocop movie, but they're doing like what they did with Halloween, which is making a direct sequel to the first original Robocop movie. So Robocop 2, 3 and this reboot are kind of don't exist. They're Elseworld stories. So we're not going to see the return of this Robocop, and I'm a bit gutted by that. However, the fact that we got it and it worked well, it isn't as good a movie as the original Robocop for me. Josh preferred it, and part of that could be like we've discussed with other films that we've watched. Like we watched the Die Hard movies, and what I thought would be his favourite wasn't his favourite. We watched the Terminator movies, and the same thing. What I thought would be his favourite wasn't his favourite. And that's because he's unburdened by nostalgia. He's seen them all at once, so he's just basing on the merits of the movie, not our memories of them. So for me, this original Robocop is the best in the series. Josh thinks this one is the better movie. And in the list itself, Robocop 2014 takes number 8 for 2014. Roaring in at number 7 is another reboot, and it's Gareth Edwards' version of Godzilla. And this was very anticipated. Godzilla goes back decades. Obviously started with the Japanese Toho films. There's been dozens of Godzilla films in that time. of varying quality. There was the 1998 US version, which was done, which wasn't that warmly received. It was initially considered non-canon, but then Toho used it in one of their movies. They referenced it because all the Godzillas have different names for the different versions, and this one's now in it and is considered canon. So this was another big budget American remake. This one had the blessing of Toho, and it was a labour of love, which you can see on the screen. It stars Aaron Taylor Johnson, Ken Watanabe, Elizabeth Olsen, Juliette Binoche, Sally Hawkins, David Strathairn, and Bryan Cranston. Interesting is that Taylor Johnson and Elizabeth Olsen play lovers, partners in this one, whereas in the Avengers movies, well, Age of Ultron, they play brother and sister. And that was an interesting thing because they both come out quite close to each other. One of the big things about the movie was, would they do Godzilla right? And in the hype trailer, or the trailer that was coming up, we didn't see Godzilla at this point, but we got to hear the roar, and the roar was perfect, which meant we, in general, were excited because there's certain things, sounds trigger, again, nostalgia, sounds trigger things, like when playing a video game, you play a Star Wars game, the blasters and the lightsabers and the swooping of the TIE fighters and that are so tied to that, that as soon as you hear it, if you're a fan of that franchise, you're playing it, suddenly what could be an average game if it didn't have the license is now elevated simply because of that sound design. Aliens is another one. The sound of the pulse rifles is such a unique thing to that movie that as soon as you hear it, you're automatically transported to Aliens, and you get a good nostalgic feeling there. With this, the roar of Godzilla was just, it was the perfect, this movie's going to be okay moment. The cast is fantastic. Bryan Cranston is a little underserved. He dies far too early in the movie when he was pitched as being like the main character in the trailers. Julia Binoche, she dies in the first act, which also is a bit of a waste of her talents, but it does set in motion what's going on. David Strathairn, he is an actor I really enjoy pretty much everything he does. He was amazing in a TV show called Alphas, which not enough people have seen. So once we finish watching this video, if you haven't seen Alphas, go and check it out. It's only 2 seasons. It was cancelled far too early, but it's a wonderful version, a wonderful encapsulation, an alternate take on superheroes and how they could be. It gives it a realistic way of how things work. The powers aren't super exaggerated, and it's a fantastic show. So go and check it out. But in this, he plays like an army general. And after the corny late 90s version I mentioned, Hollywood did have a lot of making up to do, and Gareth Edwards was the perfect man behind the lines to have that happen. One of the clever things they did, and a lot of the Godzilla movies do this actually, is Godzilla's not on screen very often. It's more the build up to him, and he's not the focal point of the movie, and it adds to his appearances when he does show up. The direction and cinematography around the movie, whether Godzilla's there or not, is exceptional. This is perfectly exemplified in the Halo jump sequence, which was glimpsed in the trailer, but the full version in the movie is astoundingly visual. The pan back, so we get a massive wide view shot, gives us the scale of Godzilla as well. This is the tallest Godzilla we've ever had, but it's also shows how tiny and insignificant we are to them, and just the way the colours are. It's just all comes together beautifully. Godzilla in this film, he's designed perfectly to be more humanoid in the way he moves and fights, as opposed to the out-and-out reptile of the 1998 version. The Mutos, which are the main antagonists of the movie, which we actually see more of than Godzilla for the most part, are excellently designed, slightly reminiscent of other things you've seen. Not quite unique, but distinctive enough to be their own thing. There's a fantastic swerve when we first see the Muto, because you're led to believe it's the first time you're going to see Godzilla. And when it's not Godzilla, you think, oh, this is not what I was expecting. It sets up the MonsterVerse perfectly. We've got this movie, we had Skull Island, which is a King Kong movie. We had Godzilla King of Monsters, which was the sequel to this one, which was also fantastic. And we had, we're going to be getting Godzilla versus King Kong, which is going to be interesting because in Skull Island, Kong is much smaller than Godzilla, but they have said that he's very young in that movie and he will grow to be similar in stature to Godzilla, which is a very frightening prospect when you think about it. But with this one, they do such a wonderful job of laying the foundation for what's to come. There are negatives to the movie. I say Bryan Cranston dying so early put a lot of people off. However, I look at it as there needs to be stakes. Taylor Johnson is a bit flat in the lead, but he does a good job with what he's given. Ken Watanabe doesn't get a lot, but his screen time is used effectively. Elizabeth Olsen is a little undercooked as a character as well. However, anything that someone feels wrong about the movie, and you're fully justified in your opinion, is overcome by two things. One is the roar being perfect, and two is the scene where he uses his atomic breath to destroy a Muto. The sound design for this, the visual and the sound design and everything and the visual effects, everything coming together on this is just the perfect encapsulation of what Godzilla is. He is a force of nature. He is a titan. We don't control him. He's not our pet. We are his pets, and he is looking out for us. And the scene where the atomic breath comes is a punch the air moment, and it's the perfect way for the fight between Godzilla and the main Muto to end. And again, Godzilla, once he's saved what he considers to be his pets, he goes away. He'll come back when he's needed. And that was Godzilla King of Monsters. This is an amazing film. It's a perfect example of why reboots, and I've said this ad nauseum through this whole list, through the whole series so far, but this is another reason why reboots are important. Sure, some miss the mark, but when you get hits like this, when you get hits like Evil Dead, which was #1 last week, when we get fantastic films like The Invisible Man this year, we need reboots. It's worth suffering through the bad movies to get the masterpieces that we do end up with on occasion. And Godzilla roars his way into #7. And at #6 is essentially what some could call Video Game the Movie. It's Edge of Tomorrow, starring Tom Cruise. Now, in some places it's called Live, Die, Repeat, but here in the UK it was called Edge of Tomorrow. And the premise, it's a premise that has been done before. Like Groundhog Day is a good example. Happy Death Day is another one. But in this, essentially, Tom Cruise plays a character who is a bit of a dick. He's in the army, but he's a pen pusher who's then put on the front line. He's killed pretty much instantly. But then he wakes up at an earlier moment in time when he was still arriving at the base. And at first, like anyone in these films, he thinks that the original experience was a dream. Why wouldn't you? You've startled yourself awake and you're heading into what you've just experienced, so you think, I must have dreamt that. But then the events unfold in the exact same way they did before, and then you learn and you progress a little further each time, which is what happens in a video game. You have your spawn points, you have your checkpoints. And in this, every time Tom Cruise's character dies, he ends up going back to a spawn point. It's him turning to the base. But he has all his memories of his previous attempt at surviving the level. So it works fantastically well. The film itself is from Doug Liman. It stars Tom Cruise, Emily Blunt, the late great Bill Paxton, and Brendan Gleeson. Now Tom Cruise, especially in his later years, in the last 10, 15 years actually, he's pretty much been an unmissable actor. Anything he has been in even if it's just his scenes, are worth seeking out and watching. The Mission Impossible franchise being the main ones, obviously. I loved his turn as Jack Reacher. Some people didn't, because it deviated from the source material as it relates to the character, physically at least. Emily Blunt is great in this movie as well, as a character who had the same experience as Tom Cruise's character. So she knows what's going on, and she helps him. And Bill Paxton, always fantastic to see Bill Paxton on screen. He is sorely missed. Like I say, Tom Cruise's character is against his more recent type of character, because he's essentially a snivelling coward. But his experiences of dying and dying and dying and dying and dying, hence the non-Yuki title of Live, Die, Repeat, toughen him up, harden him up, and he becomes an excellent soldier. Like with Groundhog Day, we don't get to see how many times he's had this experience, but it's hinted at and room to be that he's done this thousands of times. We can only get to see a certain amount of them, obviously for running time reasons. But it's done so well, and the movie's kind of like Independence Day meets Groundhog Day because it's about an alien invasion as well. And the premise itself is wonderfully realised on screen, and the script has many great moments that actually honour both Independence Day and Groundhog Day. Visually, the special effects are astounding, both practical and CGI. It's a pretty seamless mix of everything. The action is visceral, which is another word I've used a lot in the series so far. It's grimy, in your face, it's front-line, D-Day type carnage, but obviously for an alien invasion type of thing. This is essentially humanity's last stand. It's their last assault, it's their last offensive, and if they lose this battle, they lose the planet. If they win this battle, they save the Earth. It's quite a dramatic position to be in. And as I say, it plays like a video game, which is the whole point. It's learning from trial and error. And how they translate that from the script to the screen just worked for what the movie's supposed to be. It has an interesting climax. I don't think we're going to get a sequel to it. There was talk of one. But if we don't, it's a fantastic film in its own right, and it takes a worthy spot at number 6. Kicking off the second half of the list at number 5 is the return of another franchise which we featured earlier in the series. It's the X-Men, with X-Men Days of Future Past. And this was a very exciting prospect. First Class was an excellent reboot of the franchise with younger versions of established characters plus some new ones. James McAvoy, Michael Fassbender were amazing in their roles as Charles Xavier and Eric Lyncher / Magneto. They obviously return in this one. It's directed by Bryan Singer. Hugh Jackman as Wolverine returns as well after his cameo in First Class. Because it's Days of Future Past, though, which was a fantastic miniseries in the comics. It was a mini story arc, and it was done excellently in the 90s animated TV series as a two-parter. It's a beloved story, and after they messed up the Phoenix Saga story with the Last Stand and got some goodwill back with First Class, this was their first stab at another big story. And because it's Days of Future Past, and the story is the future, in the main story, in the original story, it was Kitty Pryde coming back. It was one of her powers. In this, they used Wolverine, which works because he was alive in both periods. So instead of physically sending someone back, they sent his future self's consciousness into his younger self's body. And an interesting aspect of that is it's before he got his adamantium skeleton. So when we come back, it's actually Logan, mind Logan with the adamantium skeleton, but body Logan without it. So when he first encounters a fight, he is shocked when his bone claws come out, and there's no adamantium. So when he gets shot, it hurts a lot more, and he forgot about that. so that's played for laughs. But one of the great aspects of this is because it's set in the future and the past, we get both versions of Magneto and Charles Xavier, which was part of the marketing. So we have James McAvoy and Patrick Stewart playing young and old Charles Xavier. We have Michael Fassbender and Ian McKellen playing young and old Eric Lancher Magneto. Anna Paquin returns as Rogue. Ellen Page returns as Kitty Pryde. Jennifer Lawrence plays Mystique. Evan Peters is introduced as Quicksilver. Halle Berry is back as Storm. Nicholas Hoult is Beast, is also here as well. And Peter Dinklage is introduced as Bolivar Trask, who invents and creates the Sentinel program, which, if you're a fan of the comics or even the 90s cartoon, you'll know the Sentinels are one of the main antagonists of the X-Men, and they are fantastic villains. So in this one, having to follow up the movie that saved the X-Men franchise, while establishing new versions of the characters, then bringing back the old versions of the characters and adding in a revered story from the comics, it had such potential to fail, and that it didn't is immense. That they succeeded so well is a testament to Bryan Singer as a director. If the allegations are to be believed, Bryan Singer the person is not a nice guy. Taking him at just his strengths as a director of the X-Men movie specifically, he's the best director the series has had. He understood the characters better than anyone else. It just seemed to work better when he was at the helm. The original cast in the First Class crew in the same movie was a real passing of the torch event, and new characters that were added also didn't detract from the story they were trying to tell. The opening set in the future, where the Sentinels have evolved from their original version as the Sentinels do, is terrifying. It's so brutal, and it explains why they have to send someone back to the past to prevent what's going to happen. How they do it is inspired, as I say in the comics, it was Kitty Pryde. Here it's Wolverine, and it makes sense in the narrative they're trying to tell. In the future, it shows why it has to happen, because the X-Men have teamed up with the Brotherhood, which is Magneto's gang. They're all on one side now, but they're being decimated. We see Sunspot die. We see Iceman get beheaded. That's on screen. That, for a comic book movie aimed at a younger audience, was really unexpected. And the Sentinels and the way they evolve and everything else are so inspired, and how they explain it is the DNA from the mutants. So one of the things, they have Mystique's DNA, which allows them to shapeshift. They then take the DNA from other X-Men, and they use whatever's attached to them. They find the perfect counter. So what works once won't work a second time, similar to the Borg. So you end up with Sunspot's power being used against Iceman, which obviously is completely opposite. And then eventually leads to him being beheaded, which again, as I said, was totally unexpected. The first gen versions of the Sentinels are very evocative of the comic book version and the 90s TV version of the Sentinels, but not being a direct rip-off. They work in the sense of when they're being built, which is in the 70s, they work for the aesthetic of what would have been available in the 70s, a little exaggerated, with Peter Dinklage as Bolivar Trask, which is a role that was recast from the original X-Men movie. Similar to Hank McCoy, who was featured on a TV screen in one of the earlier movies before he appeared as Beast. Bolivar Trask was a black man in the earlier X-Men movies. He's now Peter Dinklage in this. And he's a revelation as Bolivar Trask. Peter Dinklage, as you know, has dwarfism, so he's a small man. And they use that in the movie as a reason why he has an issue with mutants, because obviously they're a genetic evolution, they're a genetic anomaly, as is he. But he got this stigma, whereas they got powers. So there's an issue there. which is done really well. The big set pieces in the movie don't seem to be tacked on just for the sake of escalation. They make logical sense as they build up over time. The movie itself is worth watching alone for the Quicksilver scene, which, if you've seen the movie, you know what it is. It's just an amazingly perfect introduction to that character's powers and what it's like to be him, seeing everything so slow. They do hint at Magneto being his father, but they don't out and out say it. They also hint at Scarlet Witch without saying it, mainly because of the confusion and the fact that both the MCU and the Fox X-Men movies had their own version of Quicksilver. It was a very interesting time that we had the same character done in two separate continuities. But Quicksilver's a fantastic addition to this. It reset everything that was wrong with The Last Stand, with people dying and everything else. Allowed us to have a happy ever after for the original characters and their actors. And one of the things that actually stands out with this movie for me was the marketing before release. It was almost on a par with the I Believe in Harvey Dent marketing for The Dark Knight. There was websites set up showing what had happened, the timeline of events that had happened, with the Sentinels being introduced and mutants that were captured and killed and everything else. There were secret files that we could access. There was mutant propaganda that we could access. There were schematics for the Sentinels. There was so much marketing done for this movie, and it was absolutely astounding. This meant that with the critical and commercial success of Days of Future Past, the First Class gang were now 2 for 2 for excellent films. Could they continue it going into their third movie, X-Men Apocalypse? Well, you'll find out later in the series if it shows up. But for now, they are 2 for 2, and in this case, 2 and 2 equals 5. Dancing in at number 4, we have another continuation in the MCU. It's the introduction of possibly the least known heroes prior to their appearance in the MCU. It's that gang of misfits, the Guardians of the Galaxy. And like Iron Man, this was a huge risk. At this point, the MCU is established. We have had phase 1, we've introduced the main Avengers, we're now in the process of introducing newer characters, but this is now taking us to the cosmic side of the MCU universe. There's very few scenes set on Earth, so with this one, it introduces the Guardians of the Galaxy, which is, if Iron Man was a C-class hero before, or B, being generous, before his movie came out, these guys are down about F or H. What they did though was they cast perfect people in the roles who just took the characters they were given and made them their own, and they gave it to a director in James Gunn who had the perfect blend of humour and seriousness and character development in mind to make this movie a success. And James Gunn is a fantastic director. The MCU, while there's a ongoing tone that needs to be kept, because obviously they're all part of one shared thing, they do allow their directors, and they bring in directors you wouldn't normally expect, like Kenneth Branagh to do Thor. Kenneth Branagh is known for his Shakespeare adaptations, so he was perfect for Thor. James Favreau, no offense to him, but you wouldn't have him as your first pick to be a director for a superhero movie, especially one to launch a franchise. So now we get James Gunn, and in the main cast we'll get Chris Pratt, Zoe Saldana, Dave Bautista, Vin Diesel, Bradley Cooper, Lee Pace, Michael Rooker, Karen Gillan, Jimon Hounsou, John C. Reilly, Glenn Close, and Benicio del Toro. That cast is astounding. I've got, in my notes here, I've got, this cast is epically cool. And it is. Everyone is perfect for their character. And at this point, you couldn't imagine anyone else playing any of them. Chris Pratt, coming from Parks and Recs, totally revamped his physique, which seems to be the thing that happens with the leading men in the Marvel movies. They've got fantastic trainers, personal trainers, and everyone just gets into amazing shape. This expands on the MCU while introducing the cosmic side of things, while also keeping it in step with the previous entries in the franchise, and simultaneously being completely separate from them. It's a very fine line, and they walk it perfectly. The supporting cast, of heroes, villains, in between characters, they're all great, and Ruka Yondu is a particular highlight, to the point that he was a given for coming back, and they essentially turned him face for Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. He was never an out-and-out villain, and in Guardians of the Galaxy 2, you actually find out how much of a good guy he really is. The action in the film is fantastic, how the Guardians come to be a group. The script is hilarious, the performances are pitch perfect. It's a veritable triumph of riches from everyone involved. Gift after gift to the MCU that we're still receiving to this day in all the movies that we've seen. Obviously, we haven't really had anything since Spider-Man Far From Home, culminating Phase 3 due to the pandemic, but this movie gave us so much that was in subsequent films after this. Specifically, obviously, Guardians 2 and the Infinity War and the Endgame movies. If you'd said to someone before the movie came out, especially if they weren't fans of the comic, that two of the most beloved characters in the MCU would be a genetically altered space raccoon and a giant walking, talking tree that can only say one thing, you would have been considered off your tits on toot. But the fact that Rocket Raccoon and Groot are so, and again, as CGI characters, all the other characters are on screen. As CGI characters, they just exude so much personality, so much sympathy, so much emotion, their relationship, and everything about them is perfect. I'm saying perfect so much in this mini review, mini recommendation for the movie, but everything about it is just awesome. Groot and Rocket are just marvels of CGI and character. Again, Vin Diesel voicing Groot is perfect simply because of the baritone that Vin Diesel has in his voice. Bradley Cooper is the perfect snark for Rocket Raccoon. They just seem tangible, which, when you can get CGI to feel tangible, you're doing something right. It also gives a wonderful message that your family isn't always your blood. Obviously, blood family is important, but you can have a family of friends that will be your brothers and sisters. And I've been lucky enough to experience this a couple of times in my life with a group of people, and it's a wonderful thing to do on the screen that these people are, or they have become by the end of the movie, they have become a family. They are the Guardians of the Galaxy. And it was the perfect counterpoint to what we'd seen so far to extend the universe, the MCU. Plus, how can you forget, how could you not love that they saved the world, they saved the galaxy, hence them being the Guardians of the Galaxy, through dance-off. Star-Lord dance-off. Star-Lord culminating his fight with Ronan the Accuser in a dance-off is just the perfect subversion and tone for this movie. It's a testament to everyone involved, to James Gunn's ideas, and I love it. I've watched that scene a number of times just on its own, isolated on YouTube. I've watched the outtakes from that scene, which are just as hilarious. And if you watch this movie and you just don't fall in love with the characters and the Guardians of the Galaxy, dance away with number 4. Which means we are now down to the final 3 of 2014. So who is going to take the bronze, the silver and the gold? With the gold going on to episode 11, to battle it out to be the movie of the decade. There's only one way to find out, and that is to continue with the countdown. And the movie that came in at number 3 is another film that came from nowhere. In theory, shouldn't have worked, but did, launched the franchise, and is now one of the most beloved characters in movie series in the modern age. It's Keanu Reeves starring as John Wick. And as soon as you hear the name John Wick, if you've seen the movies or even seen the memes or even seen clips, you know in your head you have a vision of John Wick in action. John Wick showed everyone that Keanu Reeves can lead and be masterful. The headline act in a action movie. Chad Stahelski, who was one of the stunt guys on Keanu Reeves' Matrix movies. Chad Stahelski is the director this time. It stars Keanu Reeves as John Wick, Michael Nyqvist in the lead antagonist role, Alfie Allen, Adrian Palicki, Bridget Moynihan, Dean Winters, Ian McShane, John Leguizamo, and William Dafoe. So that, again, is a fantastic cast. And why is it great? Why did it work so well? Well, I think part of it is that it came from out of nowhere. It helped redefine the genre of the revenge story. Keanu Reeves, and it's fucking Keanu Reeves in this movie. No one saw this coming, and it blew everyone's mind, and it is just a phenomenal performance. The supporting characters are given enough for us to know who they are, what they're about, their motivations, their allegiances, and so on, and we get to have a sympathy for them or not. We learn about who John Wick is to these people simply by their reactions and the reaction of others to mentions of his name. This is exemplified when Aurelio, played by John Leguizamo, informs Vigo, the leader of the Russian mafia, why he punched Vigo's son Yosef, played by Alfie Allen. Because that should be a death sentence. You've punched in the face the son, who is an asshole, but he's still the son of the leader of the Russian mafia. But when Vigo is told why Aurelio punched his son, that he stole John Wick's car and killed his dog, Vigo's only response is, oh. Because even he knows at this point, he's fucked. His son is fucked. John Wick, they call him in the movie, they call him Baba Yaga, the boogeyman. And his reputation shows that it's fully deserved. So Vigo knows that his son has made a big mistake. And there's scenes between the two where this is put over very well. The action is stunning, mostly practical in screen. The fights and the gunplay and everything else, there's a lot of long takes. And anyone who watches a lot of action movies knows long takes give an added sense of realism to the things that are happening on screen, whether it be gunfights, martial arts fights, just brawls, that kind of thing, because you're not cutting away, which can be used to hide things. So the fact that they have these extended cuts and give John Wick its own identity, it's brilliant cinematography, it's brilliant choreography. We also are introduced to the world of assassins that John Wick is a part of, with the Continental Hotel, with Charon on the gate. Charon was the fireman of the River Styx, for those who like the Greek mythology. Ian McShane as Winston, who runs the New York Continental, is just wonderful. He's slightly camp, a bit aloof, but he's just a great character. And the rules of the Continental are very strict, which we find out through Adrian Palicki's character and her fate. All in all, it's a simple tale of a retired assassin seeking revenge for the death of his dog and the theft of his car. The fact that they were given to him as parting gifts by his dead wife is all the motivation that we need, because John Wick was out of the game. And it's lean, mean, and thrilling. Kicked off a franchise that's going to be going strong with John Wick 4, which should have been filmed, but the COVID's messed that up. And recent reports have said that John Wick 5 has been filmed back to back with it, so that's fantastic as well. But John Wick takes our number 3 spot, and it's fully deserved. Will John Wick 2 or John Wick 3 feature in upcoming lists? We will find out on those episodes. But for now, the original John Wick takes the bronze spot and is the third best movie that we saw in 2014. Going from the first entry in what would become a franchise to the second entry of an ongoing trilogy slash reboot slash prequel with Dawn of the Planet of the Apes. This is directed by Matt Reeves and it's the second of the modern day Apes trilogy. It has Andy Serkis returning as Caesar, but none of the original human characters except for some brief video footage. Jason Clarke, who played John Connor in Terminator Genisys. Gary Oldman, who is featured in this list a lot. Kerry Russell, Toby Kebbell, Cody Smith-McPhee. And Toby Kebbell plays Koba, who's like the anti-Caesar of the ape world. And what this does really well is it builds on the previous film's premise, and we're now at the beginning of apes starting to take over. They have their own little civilizations. A lot of the human population has started dying off based on the simian flu that began spreading at the end of the previous movie, which is what wipes out most of humanity. That when we watch the original Planet of the Apes, and Taylor's ship returns to what we eventually find out is Earth, it's why the remaining humans are mute and why apes are the dominant species. Builds on what happened, hence the title, Dawn of the Planet of the Apes. Andy Serkis, and I've said this before in the previous entry for Rise of the Planet of the Apes, that he isn't doing motion capture, he is performing. And all they're doing is put a layer over his performance to make it look like an ape. That's what. And when I say all they're doing, obviously that's very detailed and important work. But the performance is all Andy Serkis, and he should have been nominated for. He should have been nominated for the Best Actor Oscar, which is obviously the highest award in the movie industry, for the performance capture work he did. He isn't animating a character; he's playing this character, and that he wasn't nominated for acting awards continues to be a travesty. The action and the escalation of the ideas from the original movie in this run are astoundingly put across. We're still in the period where the astronauts who took off in the Icarus, which again was referenced in the first film, are out in space somewhere, asleep, waiting to come back. And this film is filled with touching, emotional moments. The apes just want to live in peace. Humanity won't let them live in peace. So again, we're the architects of their own downfall. The effects, everything, the set pieces are astounding. And this is a worthy sequel, a worthy follow-up to Rise of the Planet of the Apes, and a worthy lead-in to War of the Planet of the Apes, which rounded out the trilogy. To believe they're not going to be doing any further movies in this timeline. I don't know. I haven't heard much of whether they're going to remake the original Planet of the Apes and have Taylor return to this version of what Earth will be and see how that works. But I'm excited to see if they do another one. But for now, this is the second movie in the trilogy, and it also is the second best movie of 2014 in our opinion. So what film is taking the top spot? Again, it's another entry in a franchise. We are sticking with the MCU, we are returning there. And it's the return of our favourite super soldier, Steve Rogers, in Captain America, The Winter Soldier. A follow-up to Captain America, The First Avenger, and obviously the MCU as a whole. I think this was the first one that was done by the Russo brothers, Anthony and Joe. I believe it was because I think this has cemented them as the go-to guys for the MCU. They did this, they did Civil War, and they did Infinity War and Endgame. So the Russo brothers were the go-to guys. It has Chris Evans returning as Steve Rogers Captain America. Scarlett Johansson is back as Natasha Romanoff, Black Widow. Sebastian Stan returns as the Winter Soldier himself, Bucky Barnes. Anthony Mackie is introduced as the Falcon, who has been a mainstay ever since. Kobe Smulders returns as Maria Hill. Frank Grillo is in as a pre-Crossbones Brock. Emily Van Camp, Haley Atwell is also featured again as Peggy Carter. Robert Redford is in, and Samuel L. Jackson returns as Nick Fury. So that again is a powerhouse of a cast. This is arguably when the MCU grew up, and it's the beginning to the turn of accountability for actions for the heroes and the villains, which eventually led to Civil War and the Sokovia Accords. It's also the reason why Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., the TV show, the MCU TV show, was spinning its wheels for the first half of the season. I enjoyed the first half of the season, but you got the sense that they were holding something back. And Captain America the Winter Soldier was that reason. Because the Hail Hydra moment in this, once the Hail Hydra moment, was, the cat was out the bag, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. obviously incorporated it into their show, and it never looked back. The finale episode for the final season has just aired, so the show has now ended, and that ran for 7 seasons. And I say that it was because they did the Hydra infiltrating S.H.I.E.L.D. thing so well. And the show kicked itself into a new gear, and as I say, never looked back. The movie is, it's almost a political thriller. It has high stakes, political intrigue. Robert Redford is relishing his role, which he's kind of played before in other movies. Like say, this is a political thriller masquerading as a comic book action movie, and he is fantastic in it. Frank Grillo as a pre-costumed Crossbones is astounding, and I'm glad he got to come back, even if it was for a short stint in Age of Ultron. The introduction of Anthony Mackie as Falcon is really well done, with how him and Steve become friends before Captain America and Falcon become friends. That's really well done. And he's now a lasting character in the show. Sebastian Stan just knocks it out the park as the titular antagonist, the Winter Soldier, exuding menace and eventually sympathy and empathy in equal measure. He is astounding as the Winter Soldier before the reveal in the movie of who he is. So the characters don't know who he is, they just know he's this legendary assassin for the bad guys who has made a reputation for himself for being so efficient. They don't realise it's Bucky Barnes. And while this is the best story-based entry in the MCU, it isn't without its awesome action set pieces. The assault and assassination on Nick Fury is astounding. The scenes between the Winter Soldier and Captain America, especially when he catches his shield the first time, is also expertly done. And the set pieces are set up all throughout. It sets us up for things that will come to pass, leading to the Sokovia Accords. In this, again, Chris Evans is Captain America. The MCU has had a knack for casting the perfect actor in the perfect role, and Chris Evans was a risk based on his turn as Johnny Storm in the Fantastic Four films, which he was excellent as, but the tone of character is so separate from each other. Does he have the range to play both? And he does. And the MCU, as I said, they have just this knack for casting the perfect protagonists, antagonists, even minor roles that could end up being major roles down the line. It's an accolade that they have earned, and The Winter Soldier is, for me, it's the best movie of Phase 2. It's the best Captain America movie, and it's the best single film story they've done. It just, everything about it works. It's a political thriller. The brief cameo return of Arnim Zola, the whole Hail Hydra thing, the elevator fight, which has been parodied by many different memes, is such an excellent set piece, and they play off it perfectly, along with the Hail Hydra stuff here in Endgame when they do the time heists. Captain America, the Winter Soldier, is an excellent movie. Whether it was in the MCU or not, if this was a standalone film, it would still be perfect. The performances, the nuance, not everyone is evil and black, not everyone is good and white, there's shades of grey. Captain America having his world ripped around him, seeing what the love of his life, Peggy Carter, created being destroyed from the inside. The intrigue, the fact, as I say, it's a political thriller. They got Robert Redford to be in a Marvel Comics movie. It's astounding, and like someone who is able to pick up Mjolnir, it is worthy of our #1 spot. It is worthy of the best movie of 2014, and it's worthy of moving on to the final round to be featured alongside Scott Pilgrim, Drive, Dredd, and The Evil Dead. So we now have 5 movies in the final. We're halfway there. Up next is 2015. But for now, thank you very much for watching. Please leave your comments below on how you feel the list went. What should have been there? What shouldn't have been there? Were they in the right order? Would you have put them in a different order? Let us know in the comments down below, either on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, wherever you're seeing this. Look out for the next videos in the coming weeks. If you're interested in this t-shirt, you can get it from katenix.com/merch, where you can get loads of other fantastic t-shirts. But for now, as I said, thank you for watching. Please like and share the video, subscribe to the channel, wear a mask, keep yourself safe, and we'll see you again soon. Goodbye.